The moon hung high over the open plain. Though the grass had long since perished, the cool but firm dirt beneath Trixie's hooves was much better alternative to the rot that covered most of the ground outside. Despite this, Trixie scowled as she walked up to the wooden stage, the new planks shining bright in the moonlight. After she ascended, she turned and faced the crowd. The open plain stretched out nearly endlessly before her, and the ornate armored ponies of the Royal Guard stood ranked, about 10 ponies deep. "Warrant, officer!" A unicorn in the front row's horn flashed, and a moment later he stood next to his mistress. "Yes, great and powerful Trixie!" Trixie's hood was down, letting the unfortunate officer see the anger in her face rise. "I gave you the order to assemble the Royal Guard, not an invitation for those who felt like showing up. Where are my legions of soldiers?" The warrant officer hesitated, but gulped as he accepted that there was no escape. "Ma'am, our efforts were hampered by the Queen. She insisted that the Royal Guard doesn't count as personal resources, ma'am. These ponies here are here against her orders." Trixie scowled up at the castle, the mountain rising above them. "That bitch, Nightmare Moon!" Trixie turned away from the lowly unicorn, his existence forgotten beneath temporarily. "She wants to strip me of my forces? Fine. She's given me plenty of her own power to purge the few weak rebels on my own. Never mind with—" She whipped her head around, her mind counting the ponies before her instantly. 100 of my own troops! Warrant, officer! Yes, great. Our anchors have been placed in the forest by now? Correct? Yes, they are good. Give the order for the troops. Prepare for mass teleport in 10 minutes. The sergeant saluted smartly and turned to the soldiers. As he relayed his orders, Trixie jumped down from the stage and walked off to the side. Supported by 2 of her specialists, the captain hung limply. Her head rose as the approach of hoopsteps neared, and Trixie saw that no smile was anywhere to be seen on that cursed blue face. "Well, Captain, we are almost underway. Your friends will be nothing more than a smoking crater by this time tomorrow night." She leered over the beaten pony, the moonlight glinting off her eyes and teeth. "They still aren't my friends, fool. You really think you can hide this from Nightmare Moon? Your men will be fired as soon as you return, maybe even killed for obeying you over her." The captain tried to spit on the ground, but the liquid mostly just dribbled out from her injured jaw. "They're mere pawns, nothing more." Trixie waved a hoof dismissively, and the 2 ponies holding the captain up just stared forward. "They have been trained to do their job, regardless of the consequences. Something that you never had the stomach for, as these rebels staying alive can attest to." "You're a bitch, Trixie. We're on the same side, and you're too caught up in your conspiracy theories to even acknowledge the possibility. If you're going to tell me that you simply walked out of the cave, don't waste my time. Your refusal to help me is all the proof I need to know that you're a traitor." Trixie snorted and turned away. "Not that I care, anyway," she added mentally. "She'll just be as dead after all this, no matter where her loyalties lie." The new Ponyville Infirmary was located inside one of the main parts of town, one of its walls resting against a natural stone of the cavern wall. It was a design plan that Rarity was rather proud of. It gave patients a quiet area to rest, while also providing a soft quarantine zone for them to recover in. "Lives are saved here every day," Rarity thought, as the building came into view. "But no pony ever thanks the kind doctors inside. Perhaps I shall make a note to have them recognized publicly. A feast, perhaps." She caught herself mid-thought. The good mood she had fought so hard to recover suddenly vanished, more sullen than when she had woken up. But still forcing a smile, she pushed through the door to the clinic. All thoughts of public recognition vanished at the sight before Rarity. A long bench sat against a far wall, with sickly-looking ponies taking up every inch of it. A few of them waved weakly as she stood in the doorway, but most were too busy trying, and, in one case failing, to hold their lunches in. "Mayor, Please, go back outside, quickly! Rarity didn't have time to see who spoke as she was blindsided by a pony and pushed unceremoniously out of the door. The unexpected movement, coupled with her flat-footedness, caused her to fall over, the dry dirt of the cavern floor poofing up around her. She coughed and turned around in anger to look at the guilty pony. I'm sorry, Mayor, but you really shouldn't be in there. Nurse Redheart ducked down to help Rarity up, but Rarity shirked her off and stood up on her own, still coughing. We don't know how it's spreading yet, and if it's airborne, then just being in the same room as them is dangerous. Trying to put aside her frustration at being knocked over, Rarity said, What's spreading? What is happening in there? As she spoke, she absently inspected her own brown and dusty coat and saddlebags. And they had looked absolutely divine, too. The disease, or virus, or whatever it is, of course. Rarity's blank look gave Nurse Redheart a pause. The one I wrote about in my report. The one marked urgent? Ah! Exclaimed Rarity as she pulled her agenda out. She frowned as she smoothed out the crumples from her fall, but it was still legible. Yes, I have it marked right here that you submitted an urgent report. That's why I'm here, in fact, to hear it in person. She forced a smile out, suddenly nervous that the other pony would burst into laughter. Why didn't I just read them first, and then come in person? She lamented. Too late now, I suppose. To Rarity's relief, the nurse did not burst out in laughter. Rather, she just shook her head and looked directly at the door. Look, Miss Rarity, I'll have to give you the short version, since I'm still a little strained from free time at the moment. We got our first patient 2 days ago, and they've been pouring in ever since. Symptoms include sweating, fatigue, nausea, and vomiting, diarrhea. Please, don't. I mean, have there been any deaths? Rarity's stomach was churning at the thought of the biological mess inside the infirmary right now, but she couldn't help excuse herself. No, thanks, Celestia. Nurse Redheart looked briefly at the sky, closing her eyes for a moment in silent thanks. But some of these ponies, it gets really bad, Miss Rarity, and patient 0 hasn't shown any signs of improvement yet, so we don't know how long it will last. It might even be fatal down the line. It's only been 2 days for him, after all. Is there no chance of finding a cure? We've had sickness in New Ponyville before, right? I mean, we can't have gone 10 months down here without something like this happening before, Rarity reassured herself. Not like this, Mayor. A particularly loud cough from inside made Nurse Redheart turn anxiously towards the door, but she held her ground. Sure, we've had sick ponies before, but always little bugs that we knew how to cure. She sighed, looking at the ground. In Ponyville, we had the equipment to look for our own cures to new sicknesses, but here? She looked around and gestured with one hoof. We are literally living under a rock. We ran out of serious medical supplies months ago, and with no way of making more, our only way to heal ponies is to give them a warm meal and a bed. That's it? Rarity was shocked that the medical pony's report ended there. We have a new medical problem, and no way to stop it? Can you at least figure out where it came from? Rarity's breath was shallow, worry beginning to eat at her. No, Mayor. We don't know anything. I was just a nurse back in Ponyville. Her voice was strained, and Rarity finally noticed that there was moisture in her eyes. I just tried to help ponies. But I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm not a doctor, Rarity. But I'm expected to run a hospital? I'm good with ponies. I can make them comfortable, but I can't make them better. A call sounded from inside, and the nurse turned her head again. I'm sorry, Mayor, but I really have to go. You run this infirmary? Asked Rarity, and the nurse stopped in the doorway. Turning quickly over her shoulder, she yelled back. Of course I do. No pony else here can do it, but I'm the closest anyone has to some pony who can. She hesitated for a moment, then added, I don't know what I'm doing here, but at least other ponies think I do, and that's better than nothing. It gives them hope. Not waiting for Rarity to respond, the white unicorn ducked inside the door and was gone. Rarity stood for a moment, then turned and walked slowly away from the building. Hope, she thought. It all comes back to hope. She made her way slowly back into the town proper, the buildings becoming larger and more ponies walking the streets as she went. She took the job to help ponies? Doesn't taking a responsibility you can't handle hurt them more than helping them? Her steps slowed as the parallels dawned on her. What about me? No, I couldn't have hurt every pony. They wanted me to lead them. Plus, I gave them hope. I succeeded. She knew that the nurse had given patients hope too, and deep down another question plagued her. But instead, she pulled out her agenda and looked towards the final item. Sighing in relief, she put it back in her dusty and disheveled bags. A promotion to attend? Well then, finally, some good news today. Twilight sat in Rainbow Dash's bedroom. Her friend was asleep in her bed, but Twilight hardly noticed. Her work absorbed her, and she had compromised between keeping her friend company and trying to get home by bringing her notes and materials over to Dash's house. Okay, so basic magical theory says that teleportation works by moving the pony through space, but any first-year student will say that the world looks like it's shrinking and overlapping while the spell is being cast. If it were simply moving, my magic would have guided us both. But with the non-magical presence of another pony, the variables would have to be readjusted. Rainbow Dash snorted in her sleep, and Twilight's train of thought was interrupted. Turning back to her book in a huff, she flipped through the pages magically. Ah, crap. Okay. So the spell becomes less like moving forward and more like being pulled. Like a fishing line in reverse or something. A reverse summoning spell, maybe? But that would only work with some sort of anchoring pony on the other side, right? She scribbled some notes with a pencil. No, it's ridiculous. I'm just rambling incoherently now. She sighed and crossed out most of her page, lying her head down on the book. Without any other work to compare results to, I'm just wandering in the dark. Rarity walked grim-faced towards the guardhouse. She was still happy. She knew she was, because she kept telling herself she was. She just needed some time to get over some things. She was happy because she had given every pony hope. It didn't matter what they were hopeful for, of course, just that they were hopeful. She was happy because they were hopeful. She just wasn't smiling because she was dirty. Yes, that was it. She was dirty because she had fallen. No, been pushed to the ground by that silly nurse pony. Yes, quite silly. So silly that she really didn't warrant thinking very much about. Stuffing the events of the day into the cramped corners of her mind, Rarity forced a smile and walked through the doors to the guardhouse. The main room was empty except for a few scrambling ponies, but a sound floated down from above from a set of stairs towards the back of the room. She made her way to them and ascended them quietly, not wanting to disturb the ponies above. Has left us with room for growth, and it is with great pleasure that I present you your wings, guard captain. The stairs led out small hallway, and Rarity peeked around the doorframe to the source of the voice. Contained inside were a dozen or so ponies, standing in rank with their brown and blue guard uniforms, and stomping on the ground in applause. The floor beneath Rarity shook, but she hardly noticed as she looked towards the front of the room. Big Macintosh grabbed a small box with his mouth and turned to a pony next to him, who took 2 metal emblems out of the box and pinned them to his collar. He smiled around a scar on his face and shook hooves with Big Macintosh. Now, where have I seen those wings before? Rarity thought to herself. I know I should remember, but no, perhaps it was nothing important. It's just a militia rank, after all. The newly promoted black pony nodded to the crowd, who shouted words of encouragement to him as he cleared his throat. The new guard captain stepped forward and began to address his peers, and Rarity made her way to the back of the room, trying to find somewhere to stand that was unobstructive to get to, but also noticeable by every pony in the room. As she scanned the room for possibilities, however, she noticed Big Mac gesturing to her. With the other pony taking the spotlight, he had left the stage and now stood in front of a side door, which he entered once he was sure that Rarity had seen him. "I certainly hope he isn't going to reprimand me about being late," she grumbled as she made her way towards the door. "The agenda never actually said what time to come, that I was just supposed to be here." She nudged her way in unnoticed by the crowd, whose full attention was on the speaker. The room she entered appeared to be some sort of preparation area, with a wardrobe of different military dress outfits and a mirror against one wall, with a small writing desk against the other. Big Mac stood over the desk, occasionally bending his head back to take a drink from a glass of water. "Good to see you, Miss Rarity," he drawled as he looked at the desk. "You didn't actually read my report about today, did you?" Rarity's shoulders rose as blood rushed to her face. At this point, she was more angry than embarrassed that every pony seemed to figure her out almost instantly. "I'll have you know, Big Mac, that the report you sent to me never specified a time for my arrival. It only said promotion at the guardhouse." It may be a bluff, she thought to herself, but I doubt he'll actually bother to write them out much at all. "No, I didn't, Miss Rarity." He smiled as he nudged a glass of water towards her, which Rarity took with care as she looked at him in dignified anger. "Because you weren't supposed to come in person. You just needed to sign promotion documents, miss." The blood in her face became a flush of embarrassment as she sank into a chair across the desk in defeat. She looked towards the pony, remembering when she had appointed him chief of military defense for New Ponyville. Sighing, she took a sip and spoke. "I'm sorry, Big Mac." She was looking at the floor, but she knew that the face of her old friend was already smiling in forgiveness. "I've just had a long day. Is it really so obvious that I'd fallen behind on keeping in touch with events?" The red stallion snickered. "Only to us ponies near the top. Don't you worry. The boys out there put their lives on the line for you every day, though, because you're some kind of savior to them." He winked at Rarity, taking another sip. "But even those of us who know you're just a pony like the rest of us can cut you some slack. So no worries." The weight on Rarity's shoulders eased a little. "Thanks, Big Mac." She smiled at him genuinely, her defenses for the day finally coming down a little. "I was hoping for some good news when I came here, and even if that isn't what I expected, I still certainly welcome it." Big Mac drained his glass and immediately poured himself another. Rarity noticed for the first time that she was being served water out of a different bottle than Big Mac. But before she could ask why, he began speaking. "Good news? I'm just being honest with you, Rarity. It's the least I can do. I don't know why you thought you'd hear good news here, though." Rarity's eyes widened in a little surprise. Suddenly, unsure of herself, she nervously inquired, I'm sorry, Big Mac, but I was under the impression that promotions were a good thing. Correct? I admit that my knowledge of military politics is lacking, but surely that pony out there is quite elated. No?" Big Mac took a large drink from his stone cup, and Rarity caught a harsh scent as he put it down, and began talking to her. "I keep forgetting. You read literally no reports." He shook his head and looked towards the wall. The wall was covered in pictures, all of ponies in guard outfits. Some of them had their arms in bandages, some had hooves around loved ones, and all had little notes scribbled at the bottom of them. Rarity followed Big Mac's gaze towards a piece of poster that had been cut off, featuring a Wonderbolt? Promotion here doesn't really work like it does in town, Rarity. Big Mac raised his cup to the poster and drank heavily, drinking the drink. Gasping as he put it down a little too heavily, he continued his thought. There's no call to have 2 guard captains. In order for some pony to have a promotion, the position has to be vacated first. Well, that's exactly how it works in every business, too. Honestly, Big Mac, I don't see... I know you don't, Rarity. Big Mac poured another cup, and this time Rarity could see that the liquid coming from the bottle was the color of brandy. Maybe this'll help you. We've never had a pony retire from the force here. Suddenly, Rarity remembered where she had seen those pins. They had looked so different on a black pony than when she had seen them on Soren's chest. Oh, Celestia. Death had become all too common a thing in New Ponyville, but after everything that had happened, all the hope she had felt... How did he die? Suicide. Big Mac was staring into his cup, his forehoof supported by one hoof. No pony ever thought about it until after we found him. But that pony you executed? That was his old teammate. He shook his head and drained his cup again, letting the empty vessel fall from the table. I can't even imagine what he felt after he saw that. Suicide. Rarity's mind was blank except for that word. As the shock slowly faded, it filled up with even worse ones. Suicide. That's why I executed her in the first place. To end suicide. To give them hope. Now, another pony is dead because of me. She looked down at her hooves, her imagination accusingly painting the pristine white fur in blood. I killed the lieutenant to try to save every pony. I did save every pony. Almost every pony. And I never asked myself if it was worth it. She had expected good news here. A promotion, a party, maybe a small speech and some cheers. There's a downside to everything, I suppose. She felt a tear roll down her cheek, but she couldn't tear her gaze from the blood soaking into her hooves. I gave them life by dooming them to starvation. I killed an enemy to save my friends, which ended up killing them too. I took leadership to help every pony, but all I've done is given them an illusion of hope. With her mind wallowing in question of her character, the dams finally broke. Her memories of her encounter with the captain, every mortal question that was put off, every hard decision that was arbitrarily answered with generosity, came to mind at once. She choked out a breath, and Big Mac looked up from his own thoughts at the gasping unicorn. His vision swam before him, but Big Mac could still see that something was wrong with his guest. Focusing enough to remember back to what he had said to her last, he poured himself another cup of apple brandy. I know it ain't pretty, Rarity, but there's always a way forward. She looked towards him desperately, and he looked at the bottle next to him. Of course, sometimes forward doesn't look so pretty either. He pushed his cup to Rarity, who hesitated. Big Mac knew that the thoughts behind her eyes were beyond his impaired mind, but he also knew that it didn't matter what those thoughts were once she picked up the cup with her magic and began to drink.